Hooper, who is here, who is also here. Andy, if you want to give everybody a wave. So Andy's going to be managing our tech in the background. So we're here representing Business Agility New Zealand. So we're very excited. We used to have Business Agility Auckland and Business Agility Wellington, and we have just merged those into one entity, Business Agility New Zealand. And this is our very first meetup as a combined Business Agility New Zealand. So welcome, everybody. Really great to have you here. If you don't already follow our LinkedIn page, Business Agility New Zealand, we ask that you please follow us so that you can keep abreast of all of these events that we do. Generally monthly, we try to have a meetup at least once a month. So without further ado, I would like to go ahead and introduce the speaker that we have today. Really, I'm very excited about the topic of challenging assumptions and assumption busting, and this is going to be really cool. So Brendan, for those of you that don't know Brendan, this is a real treat for you. You're going to get to meet Brendan. I've had the pleasure of working with Brendan over the last couple of years, and I've learned so much from him. And yeah, Brendan is the founder of Exact Limited. Brendan, back up so I can see what your shirt says, buddy. Exact Business Performance. So he's the founder of Exact Business Performance, but he used to work for the Warehouse Group as an agile coach, and he still does contracting for the Warehouse Group 2 days a week. He's also contracting for Air New Zealand 2 days a week, along with supporting other businesses on that other day. So we're in for a real treat with Brendan today, and I would like to turn it over to him. Before I do, though, please go ahead and put yourself on mute if you're not already on mute, guys, so that just anything crazy.
Oh, Tanya, I think someone or yourself, you put yourself on mute there, leading by example.
Andy muted me. Andy muted everybody. Okay. So that, but also the other thing that that I'd like to let you guys know, there's going to be questions that you'll have as Brendan is talking. So please go ahead and put those in the chat at the bottom, and we will pick those up at the end. And yeah, please ask all the questions you have. We're going to have a nice time for Q&A at the end. Over to you, Brendan.
Awesome. Hey, thank you very much for the intro as well, and again for the opportunity with you, Andy and Tanya, for extending it out and say, hey, let's come and have a chat together. It's obviously only as successful as the value that it gives you guys as well, but also hopefully there's going to be enough time at the end also to have a bit more of a conversation about it, and to just see if we can take it even another level deeper or more meaningful for us all, with all of the great perspectives that you probably could be sharing as well. So I'll from my side just share the actual pictures, the slides that we have as well. Now, I want that to overrule everything, so I'll still hopefully have myself in the picture too. Just to confirm, you guys can still see me? Yep. Okay. So yeah. So the one thing that we obviously now alluded to is the idea of there's this world of assumptions, and that's what the chat will be around as well, and also how to just identify those challenges. And to potentially through that and collaboration with others in your teams to unlock better perspectives as well. And the tool to get us there is going to be the ladder of inference. Now, I don't know how many of you're familiar with it, just maybe just with an indication, just even on the chat, like who's familiar with the ladder of inference, just with a yes or a no. Okay. Gives a bit of an idea on who we can rely on to help us understand it a bit better. And for the majority that keeps on going with no, at least it's going to be fresh to you, even though it is actually a 50-year-old framework that was introduced by Chris Argyris. He's a guy that in his background is actually regarded together with guys like Edgar Schein as one of the fathers of organizational development. So a pretty profound impact that they have made in the world. And we're going to just go and take something as tried and tested and see if we can make it fresh and applicable to our worlds as well. So yeah, thanks for the context sharing there on the chat. So yeah, so if we look at the idea around what we really are all about when we move into a business, we still want to aim for this whole thing of business success. We agree that that should be the primary focus, is what can we do to accelerate our business performance. And even within the type of work that I do, and I'm sure many of you are also involved in, we spend a lot of time focusing on things like, what is the value, what's the goals that we have as a business. And if you take that top part, you've got a business that says we've got a strategy, we have a certain set of goals that is tracking toward that strategy. It could be in the through the likes of OKRs, for example, or whatever framework you use. And ideally, you want to have good alignment between the business, the teams within the business, and the individuals as well on their goals, so that we have a common, clear focus on the why. Just hearing a bit of feedback. I don't know if that's just me. All right. Okay, so if you look at that, that's one thing that we want to make sure that we are aligned on as a business. We also want to make sure that we reduce friction and increase flow throughout the business in terms of our value delivery. Those would be almost the starting point to see what's the health of a business like. Are we delivering value? Are we across the business aligned on what our why is and what we want to focus on? But the question I think that's begging is, what if we have faulty or misaligned assumptions? What if we actually end up being challenged on some of these whys that we're heading toward, or if we think through our value delivery that something is stuck, holding us back from achieving success, but we're not all seeing it the same way in terms of what the next best step is to do to achieve business performance. And that is where we need to get back to that infamous picture of an iceberg. This one actually, just to maybe just mention it, is created by ChatGPT. So I gave it a go on the image generator, and said, hey, give me a particular iceberg in terms of what I like to see. And I thought that was a pretty cool image that it generated. So yeah, the iceberg, I don't think that's something that's going to go away for us, because what we're talking about at the iceberg level is everything below the surface is generally the things that drives the majority of our thinking, our behaviors, our philosophies, our beliefs, and our value system. So we want to make sure that we create enough opportunity to step back from whatever we are in during our time at work, or even in our personal life, and just reflect and just go and make sure that we explore and get curious about what is the things driving our behavior, our thinking, and our decision making. All right, so what we've now mentioned around the ladder of inference is I think that if we stick with a tool as tried and tested, and we start just understanding it more deeply, we can really make it something that's applicable to us. And that's what I want us to try and spend a bit of time on today through this concept. Now, we'll start at the bottom and just talk you through a happy path almost. If everything worked perfectly with a ladder of inference from Chris Argyris, you would in your, even on this talk that we have at the moment, you would be looking at a lot of data around you, which you can spend some time observing. Now, that could be from the screen that you're looking at to maybe hopefully someone close to you in the family or in the household bringing you a cup of coffee. You might have had some other stuff that you've put on. My wife, for example, yesterday decided to get us a fish tank with some new fish in it. There's so many things that potentially could distract you, but still, through all of those data pieces, information floating around us, we kind of, in our brains, protect ourselves from it by cutting to the chase and just selecting the data that we really need in order to add meaning to it. And then once we started adding meaning to it, we start going up this ladder where we're starting to make assumptions. And with assumptions, I mean, one way to look at it really is just to say it's just a best guess based on the information we have in front of us. That then once we start making guesses that we like and that are starting to have a ring to it that's true, where we're starting to say, hey, this actually was a correct guess, we start making those guesses something more valuable to us, and then we get to the conclusion stage. Now, you would have heard yourself and others in life around us talk about stop jumping to conclusions. Now, that's that point where we've gotten to the point where we've got conclusions. That over time actually starts getting embedded way more deeply as beliefs to us as well, where this is now integral to our value system. It's what we stand for. It's just how we live life based on what we think is true about the world. And then once that worldview is well established, we we act on it. So that is the more surface level, the piece that we can actually see that's above the iceberg. But that's where the opportunity now is to say, right, let's just pause and reflect, because even though this is the happy path that I spoke about now, you might, if you see what I've just done there in the steps, I've cut out the two around assumptions and conclusions. And that's where it starts getting interesting, when our brain actually tries and simplify life for us even further by just cutting those two steps out almost, and saying, right, I observe, I select the data, I add my meaning, and then I'm going to go and do something about it. I'm going to go and fix the situation. One or two examples that we're going to look at now is going to delve into that a bit deeper, and then we can maybe even see if we want to open it up to some other examples from you guys on the call. But that piece, from going from adding meaning through to beliefs, you wouldn't believe it, but it's actually a 0.2 second process in the brain. They did some research through a guy called Benjamin LeBay that hooked up some monitor tool sets onto a brain and asked someone to lift their finger and just to move their finger. And then they tried to see from the point that the person made the decision to move their finger through to it registering, or actually the decision in the brain and then the actual finger making the movement, was a 0.2 second on average time difference. So that delay, even though to us it feels pretty real time, is actually something that the brain uses to make a call as to whether whatever you're about to go and do is safe. It's something that is going to serve you well. It's going to have a good, positive, constructive impact to yourself and to others around you. Therefore, that can almost be seen as an eternity for the brain to make decisions. If we just go back to that quote from Socrates, if we've been going in the process of an examined life and not an unexamined life. So that is that process that the shortcut is allowing us to make some good calls quickly based on our value systems. Now, in our world, it would be awesome if everybody had good alignment on it, because then if we make that 0.2 second call and we just go and make decisions in our businesses, in our teams and in our personal life, we wouldn't have any issues, right? But we know it doesn't work like that. There's a guy that wrote a book, I think it's Ichimo Fumitaki, or I think it's two authors. I might have combined the two now, but from The Courage to be Disliked, said all problems are interpersonal problems, which means, I think this is a quote from my dad. He always said, I love work. It's just a pity about all of the people. Because as soon as you show up and you say something, you've got someone that potentially has a different view to you. So when you bring that into that 0.2 second moment and you're living out your actions and taking steps of what you think is right, but there's someone right next to you that has a different view, you start asking the question of where's the truth within all of this? You know, what you believe seems right, what I believe seems right. So where's the happy medium where we can say, right, this is actually the most appropriate thing, and that's also further exacerbated with what our general disposition is toward life. So if I'm a hyper positive person and I see everything as a half full, and I'm just saying, I just ignore all of the negative stuff, we need to focus on this, there's already a certain element of a belief system in that alone. Whereas if someone, again, has more of a critical mindset, they'll want to slow it down and say, I don't know if this is going to work. And they'll be wearing what Edward Abono calls the black hat, potentially as well. So between all that, what I can almost confidently think how it's going to play out if you don't learn how to follow a process that helps you is all of those beautiful things that we said in the beginning around aligned goals, around value delivery and value focus, and therefore business performance, is going to be very hard to achieve unless we master this art of actually tapping into our own mindsets, but also the collective collaborative intelligence of our whole team to make better and more informed decisions and take some action steps on that as well. Just want to check in. I can't see any questions on my side, so let me just go back in there. If there is anything, please feel free to pop it in the chat. But otherwise, I'll just cut through with a couple of examples. So one of the practical examples from a work environment, and I must also just admit that that each of these examples, as I was putting them down, I thought, you know what, these are quite personal to me, because I've personally fell into into making calls that were probably not in the most informed way, and this is one of them. So you can see with the example, if you can imagine you're part of a team, they're referring to this person called Alex, and now we're looking at it, and within this team, this person just keeps on coming across as quite domineering, and like whatever they say feels like it's controlling and influencing the room to a certain extent. Now, if you take the ladder of inference, and you take that first rung at the bottom, step 1, you could have potentially seen that during the meetings, Alex is always the first one to speak up, and the second and the third person. They almost answer their own questions. They tend to talk more than the other team members. But the choice then sits within that split second again between observing the data and selecting the data, where I then start paying more attention to how long and how frequently Alex is talking. I start then getting extra evidence in around how the other people are reacting toward Alex during the session. And that's when the meaning starts getting added, the interpretation that I put over as a layer. So Alex would then as I'm looking at, I'd be starting to seeing and interpreting as perhaps Alex is overly assertive. They're too controlling. They're just making it difficult for other people to voice their opinions. Now you can see where I'm going in my head already as I'm sitting in a team meeting. And if we don't examine anything, we just go in straight from that 0.2 seconds moment. I go and I make a call, which I feel is right. I go and I say, you know, I'm going to go and talk to Alex directly. I'm going to bring it up with the team leader and maybe the manager, and let's address the situation. Now that might in principle sound like a very good thing to do. But if we take off the lid on that whole process that happened in my mind, the step 4 on the assumptions would have been that I might have assumed that Alex's behavior is going to negatively impact and is negatively impacting team dynamics, which is just holding people back from actually getting their ideas and perspectives shared. And when I start trusting that is the case, I'll start making an even deeper conclusion around the team's performance actually going to be hampered and hindered because they're not getting enough opportunity to add their inputs into the team. The beliefs that I could start actually cultivating as a result of that is just that we need to get something done to sort out this dominating behavior from Alex, so that we can improve our team dynamics. So you can see where I am already now. I'm like, I've started making some clear conclusions and adopted a belief that our team actually has unhealthy dynamics to it. Now, when you step back from that process and you question your thought process and you just go and look at potentially some other alternative perspectives on it, you could start anywhere really on this ladder. But one of the first things is potentially just to go and look at that observable data and ask yourself a few questions on that, just to say, hey, what did I miss? Is there anything that is actually through Alex's behavior contributing positively? Is there, when I'm looking at the assumptions layer on step 4, potentially I could go and start saying, is this really negatively impacting the team dynamics? Like, is there something else maybe that's causing it? Can we also just look at the positive intent of Alex and the fact that he's probably, or she's just very comfortable speaking in meetings, and they might not even be aware of the fact that it's coming across as dominating, and also exploring alternative conclusions, right? But that's way up in the ladder, which you might have already started feeling too attached to. But you started saying to yourself, look, can I draw a different conclusion? Can I challenge myself to find another way, instead of just saying, I'm going to go and talk to Alex and talk to the team leader? Could we actually take it to the team? As Lisa Atkins would always say, just take it to the team, and to actually get the team members to speak up and share their ideas during the meetings as well, even around that specific idea of Alex talking so much. Reflecting on your beliefs, like are your beliefs about Alex's behavior potentially limiting you from considering any alternative approaches? So once you've gone through that process and you've slowed it down, so you've jumped out of the 0.2 second moment, and you start thinking about other ways in which you could approach it, you could start ending up coming up with ideas that gets people more involved in how they participate. You could end up taking things like setting some guidelines for meeting etiquette. You can it's not about coming up with the solutions, but more saying, look, by just slowing it down, you could reevaluate what your beliefs are and test it against theirs. Okay, so that is one example. Another one that I can flow through with you as well, which might be going a little bit quicker, is if I'm doing a presentation in a team meeting, and I start noticing in what I perceive as people being disinterested, distracted. So you can imagine that's something that I would have naturally gone through today as well when I prepared for this session. Is what if during my presentation I start noticing that some people are checking their phones all the time, if there's some people in the room, or everybody's cameras off during the presentation, and I keep on seeing a lot of things coming through in the chat that says BRB, be right back, be right back. The choice that I have is I could start actually focusing on that, and instead of looking at the fact that maybe people are just paying attention and they're just very focused on what's being said, I could start perceiving it as a lack of attention and engagement. And the meaning that I can start adding it over that as an interpretation is that the people are just simply not interested in the presentation, and the content is boring to them. And if I don't go and properly check my thinking again on that, I might just become demotivated. I could actually withdraw and start saying, I'm going to do this again. This just hasn't helped me in any way. And therefore I'm actually not going to put myself out there again because it just feels too unsafe. So I think that's again, how do we open up that more and not just get trapped into that shortcut version of our autopilot, and just say, right, hey, there's an impact to this thing where I could probably miss out on great opportunities in the future. So what's my assumptions? Okay, I might have started assuming that that the presentation is not valuable, that people are feeling like I'm not an effective presenter. I've started making some conclusions that, well, maybe just this whole topic is unimportant to people. So they're not going to respect any of my contributions that I'm making. And by the time I'm there, I'm going to be in such a negative headspace around believing that I'm just not competent as a team member, and that my work is not appreciated. And I know I'm taking it to a very deep level with something as simple as a presentation, but it's this mindset that if we don't check it, is so easy to fall into, whether you're in a team where you're a newbie, or whether you're someone that's actually been in the business so long that you're almost not catching up with all of the new things in potentially a business transformation. And you then start holding back from sharing and speaking up on things that you are noticing that would have been a super important value add to your team, to your business around you. And that's what we want to check in on and see what can we do to make sure that we show up in the best possible way for a business. Because by the way, there's a guy called Joseph Greene from an organization, Vital Smarts, that did in crucial conversations, they say, and it's the same as courageous conversations, where he was saying one of the key things that's stumbling blocks for businesses is people speaking up when they're noticing something that they think, hey, you know what, something is just, the smell of this thing is off, and then they hold back. And they've actually done some really good research within the world of how that impacts and what's the costs of it. And I can't remember the exact numbers, but I just remember them equating it to millions of dollars being lost as a result of people not speaking up, probably because of beliefs like this that they're carrying of, I don't know if I'm competent enough. I don't know if I'd be appreciated. I don't know if I'm really adding the right level of value in what I can bring. And what if I'm wrong? So it's those type of things. How do we step away from that and go and get a better quality perspective, get more aware of our thought processes? I think it's always just the training of that 0.2 moment for you today, when you go back into your work environment, is to say, hey, there is a thing called a ladder. And I think I'm about to do some stuff that's going to potentially impact us in a not so great way. Just that moment already is going to just give you that perspective that you could go and look at it a bit deeper. You can go and look at your assumptions again, your interpretations of that situation. Could there be other reasons explaining this behavior of my colleagues? Maybe they're dealing with an urgent email. They may be tired from a long day. We didn't even talk about the fact that we wanted cameras to be on, for example, or not to have their phones out. So how would people know that it's wrong to do? You could go and look for additional data by saying, what what feedback can I get from people after the presentation? Maybe we can have a talk about that, and I could learn something that I can do differently as well to make it more engaging. On my belief side, I could evaluate whether my beliefs is around competence, around maybe my colleagues' respect for whether they think that it's a true reflection of the scenario, or just to make it a bit more objective instead of me just being in my own head. And then I can start adjusting my actions as well as I'm getting more information out. So ultimately, I think in this case, one thing that would be really cool is if instead of me feeling like I need to withdraw and avoid responsibilities, I'm going to seek the feedback, upskill myself further, improve myself, and in doing so, actually end up developing my self-awareness, getting better at doing the presentations I need to do. And in so doing, also actually making yourself vulnerable, which is such a key step in people also feeling they can do the same from their side. And that's what strengthens a lot of our relationships and trusts in our businesses. So don't be uncomfortable with exposing yourself and asking for some perspectives and feedback shared. A last example, and then I want to throw it back to us as well, is if you can put yourself in the position, in the shoes of being a person in a small team. It could be about 6 people. And we're noticing that there's disagreement about whether we should be working in a physical office space or working remotely from home. Now, we could go again and look at the observable data. We notice that some team members, while I'm in that team, I'm seeing some people are expressing a preference for working in the physical space. Others are saying, no, hang on, I think this is a pretty cool thing. I think we want to keep on working from home. It's a nice controversial example, hey guys. But this from selecting data, I could start paying attention to the reasons and arguments that each side presents for the preferences. And then I can bring in my meaning again by looking at what I said there. For example, you might think that those who prefer the office space value face-to-face communication. That sounds right. While those who prefer remote working value flexibility. So I'm not almost giving myself an option to see if there's a place where these two views can meet. I just see it as two really opposing ideas. We need to make a decision on this thing, and then I make a call within the team to say, look, we've got to stick with a certain work arrangement. We're going to implement it, and in my organization, we stand for doing it face to face because there's a lot of value there. So I'm just going to expect everybody's going to adapt to that, or no, we have to go the other alternative as well and just do it all online because that's what I believe is the best for us to get rid of that tension. But if you go and look at the assumptions again underlying it, the assumption could have been that the team is, I might have made an assumption that the team is divided, that there is no room for compromise, which is why that tension exists. And you know what, we need to move on from this thing because we're just not going to be productive as a team until we deal with this issue. A conclusion that I could make is that this disagreement really has the potential to damage our team cohesion and performance. So again, we need to move on and just make a call. And I could start believing that the decision needs to be made to resolve the disagreement. And that's where I step into that role of saying, I'll just take the punch for this one. I'm going to enforce and prescribe that we become co-located in the way we work. Or if I have a preference for remote work, I'm going to go fully into doing that. Had we stepped back again from the 0.2 second moment and revisited, I would have said, hey, are there any additional details or data points that I might have missed? Maybe I missed the fact that some team members actually mentioned that they're open to a flexible or a hybrid working arrangement. I could have looked at my assumptions and understood that the team is not necessarily entirely divided, and that there is actually quite an openness to thinking about some alternatives and compromises within the process as well. Have they all shared valid points? Did we actually leave everybody with an opportunity to have a voice in sharing what their reasoning was? And then have I actually explored some alternative conclusions in my mind, such as that hybrid work could be something that could work for us? And then from a beliefs perspective, are your beliefs about the need for a single uniform decision limiting your ability to consider alternative solutions? And I think that is the temptation in this one for me personally, is sometimes I just want to move things on because I know we've got an outcome that we need to go and achieve. So I just go for, unilateral control and decision making. We need to make a call on this thing and move on, instead of just giving everybody that voice. So in this case, I think you could come up with some other solutions if you had given the space and time for people to talk it through. There could have been a good way to get a compromise going between all of it. Once we understand people's needs and preferences, you could find a solution that's working better for everyone. So giving you 3 examples, there's things that, without talking about an actual example, but more thinking about from a business perspective of an organization, for example, after COVID, they could be impacted in terms of their revenue going down. What a business could be doing is saying, all right, okay, well, actually, we're okay with this whole assumptions thing. We've got a capability in our business looking at human-centered design or zero-based design, or anything that's actually saying we're breaking down assumptions, and we're going to go and talk to our customers. And an example of that could have been like a Walmart that have recently, in the last couple of years, they've reached out to their customers and said, we're wondering if our store sales wouldn't be better if we actually have a cleaner look in our shops. Because I don't know if you guys have seen in Walmart how they've been famous for sometimes having things standing almost all over the place, and might not have been the most tidy of experiences. But they've reached out to customers, and they would have said, but we've explored assumptions, we've tested it out with them, we've asked them questions, and the feedback that we got was, yes, let's clean up, let's tidy up, let's make the place look a lot more clinical. Their actual revenue started dropping in the time post the renovations of their stores, because they used a model. And what I'm trying to get at there is, it could be agile, it could be human-centered design, it could be anything that sounds like it's a good framework to go and employ in exploring these assumptions. But the customers just weren't open, so they had their own conclusions carrying in their head as well of, yeah, I guess it's going to be cool if the place looks neat, but it took away something for them that took away that adventure of having to go and find the right size pants somewhere there, and then accidentally discovering another cool outfit and then buying that one as well, and actually their sales went down. So taking on a framework or a methodology or a process doesn't guarantee you from exploring these things. Make sure that you bring this into the thinking, even with something like a tool that is supposed to make it easier for us. Right, so back to the 0.2 seconds. It's, to us, maybe from a human perspective, might feel, wow, that's a short amount of time, but it's actually an eternity. So it's like an eon to the brain if we start allowing it the headspace to actually think through, what do we really stand for? What are our beliefs really? And what's the actions and how are they serving us? So I'm going to leave you with 2 things here. The one that I would really encourage you guys to go and try out is for you at an individual level, is to go through each of these 7 steps, the rungs in the ladder, and start getting comfortable with some of the powerful questions that you could consider asking yourself. And a good place to actually start is with the taking actions one. So the one at the bottom there, the number 7, which some of the questions, examples that I put down there is, what actions am I taking or planning to take based on my beliefs? So just step back and actually look at that. Or a really key one to identify, should I actually do something about this action I'm about to take, or my team is about to take, is to ask, are these actions likely to be effective and constructive in this given situation? And if you in your gut feel, you know what, I've got a feeling that something I'm about to do is going to mess up something for us in the future, or we're about to go down a path that is risky, well, that is a good step then to start looking at the belief side and asking, what beliefs am I adopting or reinforcing based on my conclusions? And are these beliefs consistent with my values and other beliefs that I hold as well? And I've basically given you 2 examples of a powerful question under each. I'm not going to go and read through each of them now, but maybe you just take one of these rungs on the ladder of inference, and you just take those questions within one of them, for example, making assumptions, and you say to yourself, I'm going to carry that for the next couple of days. And just when I feel like I'm starting to, and my team is starting to go a certain direction, how can I slow us down? And just have a quick look at that, because you don't want to do that every time as well. You don't want to keep on being the person slowing us down from the momentum of focusing on our goals, delivering and having good flow happening across the business. It's for those moments where you feel, you know what, something here needs to be just examined, that you do that. So there's some powerful questions for you. And then another useful thing for you to try at a team level is to consider these ground rules. There's 6 of them, that if you wanted to allow your time to become more self-aware at an individual, but also at a collective level in terms of these inferences, is to just tap into it if you feel like there is a likelihood of you jumping to conclusions prematurely. Really, this has been tried and tested across so many organizations that I've been a part of in a couple of different countries, where we would have spent 2 to 3 day workshops with business teams, and we let them just practically apply these 6 key ground rules. And what it did to those teams' cohesiveness, their performance levels, the decision making, the quality of the outcomes of what they took on was tremendous. And I'm talking about companies that were 6,000-7,000 large, that had 2,000-3,000 of the employees go through this whole process in their teams individually, taking on these ground rules, had really phenomenal outcomes. And you can see it seems so simple, but go and try it. Put your team put this in front of your team and say, let's hold ourselves accountable to always sharing anything that we feel is a relevant piece of information. Let's share it. And then listening, giving everybody an opportunity to share their thoughts fully. And then the step 3 and 4 on these ground rules is where we start really tapping into the ladder of inference, by saying, let's check, let's verify the meanings to these things. Let's test the assumptions. And I also said there, plus use the individual tool set that I use here around powerful questions when you are at step 3 and doing the checking, but also allow people to explain themselves. So yes, we've now shared the information that we thought was relevant, but how do we just also say, hey, yes, you've shared that now, but can you be more specific? Can you give us even more clarity on what you meant by the wording on that? What is your reasoning when you try to explain that to us? And instead of you jumping back in a defensive stance, how do we become more collaborative, which is that point 5 on the actions, like collaborative on the resolution of this thing? How do we tap into people's different perspectives and aim for something that I just like to call a shared higher purpose? It's like it's a common interest, instead of getting caught up in, oh, this is my view and your view and having an argument about it, but always saying, what is the bigger thing driving us in terms of our higher purpose that we're aiming for? And the last one, I know, Tanya, you're also a fan of this one, but through Holacracy, they introduced some processes around what is called integrative decision making. It doesn't have to be the Holacracy version of it, but I've just seen firsthand how teams just get so much more effective when they come up with an approach to better collaborative decision making. So that they can move ahead instead of always seeking a democratic outcome. How do we still give a voice to everybody to share what they think is the best, based on all of the 5 points in the ground rules above, where they've had an opportunity to share what their assumptions were, the meaning that they attach to why they think this could be really good for us to do as a decision. They've given those step 4 on the ground rules of explaining. They've shared their reasoning. And if no one else can come up with a better idea than what that individual or a couple of people had just proposed, and we know it is not going to directly lead to any big risks or high impact harm or destruction for our business or our team, then you might as well let that be the decision for now until someone comes up with a better idea. And that is what's meant by integrative decision making. But don't just focus on steps on ground rules 1 to 5. Bring that one in early on. Sometimes there's small little ways of making decisions, like the fist of 5, to say, look, I feel like this is a 4 with I'm in, I can do this, or a 1, I'm out, or however you want to do it. But create quick ways and more comprehensive ways to make decisions together as a team, because that's one of the big ones holding us back often from acting on some of these things once we've established that we actually do agree. And instead of going with violent agreement, how do we just lock in that decision and move forward on it? Okay, so that is the gist of it. So it's going to be quite meaningless and empty if it's not something that you're going to go and explore and take forward yourself. I'm sure this slide deck, we can get that out to you guys to go and reflect on again as well. But let's see if we can take on this energy and the sense of awareness of something as simple as a ladder of inference. And thanks to a guy like Chris Argyries, that we can take into our workplace. We don't always need to talk about it with everybody, but just to be aware of it could be a really powerful unlock for us in New Zealand and in the companies that you are involved in. So thanks for the time and listening. I'm going to maybe send it back to you guys to share if there's any questions that we had in the chat. I don't know, between you, Andy, and Tanya, if you had a look, or anything that just sounds like a good conversation starter that we could go and reflect on. We've got a bit more time, so let's have a chat.
There, excuse me, Brendan. Yes, there are a few questions in the chat. So do you want me to read those out to you? So I asked the first one, which is going back to that Alex, the scenario of Alex, and take it to the team. How would you suggest raising this with the team while protecting Alex's safety?
Yeah, and again, I think is that something that anybody has a thought from their side? I mean, I've got thoughts, but what's your thoughts? Especially try and test how we could use this idea that I said about the ground rules around the sharing and the listening, and how do we allow people to share their reasoning? How do we get that type of behavior out? That's probably what would be a good starting point. But any thoughts from anyone? How do we make it safe?
Feel free to unmute yourself if you want to jump in here, guys.
Stab, does it start with a social contract? Would that help? Were you actually sort of discussing it at the beginning, going, guys, like if we're going to say, maybe it's like something like Elmo that we use in the business. You're saying like, guys,
what does that stand for again, Jeremy?
Sorry?
What does Elmo stand for?
It's actually working really good.
Yeah.
But I think it only worked because we sort of discussed it in the social contract at the beginning. And we have, maybe it's just something else that, hey, look, if we feel like we're going overboard, that we just have another safe word, maybe. I don't know. But probably no agree on it. Yeah,
and I think that it's I've seen that being one of my biggest supporting allies is having a working agreement that you can reference to hold each other accountable, especially if you've figured it out up front. But we do sometimes miss it. Like yesterday, I had a session that I forgot to do the working agreement, even though I've done it for years and years. I didn't do it with a team, and there were some side sub talks, when people start having these little side pocket conversations, and I didn't know how to stop it. But if you didn't have a working agreement in place, another thought would be, in my case, I just made myself vulnerable, and I said, hey guys, I slipped up. I didn't actually think about what's going to be our ground rules for the session, and therefore I've created a couple of opportunities for us to have these side conversations. Is it okay to add one in? And everybody was very, very okay with volunteering that in. But then it makes it easy to hold ourselves accountable again. Amanda, you had your hand up.
I had, and I was wondering about, I was listening to a book recently about talking in stories and using stories to help people not buy in, but to make people have better emotional connections. So it was interesting to me, is like, how are we going to make Alex safe? And I'm just wondering if, as you don't have to be the leader in the group, but you can be the person that's busy speaking, and using the opportunity of using a story to connect people together. And it would be something that's pertaining to that particular problem. So you'll use it as a metaphor for a problem that you're busy dealing with, to get people to respond. Because at the moment you use a story, people respond better. So I'm just thinking, if they're dealing with, hey, we're struggling to deal with everybody talking, then you can tell the story of, when I was in a situation when somebody didn't speak up, and now that was the conclusion. And when people listen to the story, they can see themselves in it and then make the emotional connection.
Yeah, I think that's cool. Those ground rules that I referred to earlier about the getting into a point where you provide specifics, where you share your reasoning. There's nothing as good as a good metaphor or a story to make it something that people can actually hold on to in their heads, and they can actually visualize it with you. And then it's not about you anymore. They're actually talking about this thing that so it's like Edgar Schein calls it a campfire moment, where you actually take it out of you and you put it out in front of everybody, and you just get curious about that thing together. I think it's a really powerful approach. Thanks for sharing, Amanda.
We have another from Jackie, and Jackie, you've written one in the chat here that's a really good kind of observation as well as a question. Would you be willing to ask your question, Neil?
Yeah, sure. And I was just sort of posing if Brendan is keen to get your opinion on it. So referring to Balvin's team roles probably tells you how long I've been in the corporate game. But I've always found it really, really helpful to understand, especially in tech teams that you work with regularly, understand the different roles that people play, because often that helps you understand where they're coming from with their views and opinions on things. You know, so the implementer will always think of it from that perspective, or how are we practically going to do it, versus the other roles. And so that helped me many times not jump to assumptions of my own, but to step back and go, okay, given what I know about this person and the role they play in the team, that's a perfectly logical way for them to look at things. How might I come from another angle to put another spin on this so that we make sure, like you say, that we've got all the data before we make decisions? So yeah, just keen to know whether you've done any work in that space and how you found it.
Yeah, so I might be exposing myself too as well, Jackie, because that was one of the first things that I had implemented in a telecommunications company many years back, was around the Balvin roles as well, and for it to become a consistently shared and embraced model across the business. Now, I think that to me was more the key than it being the Balvin roles, for example, but more doing some good solid pre-work and almost architecting what is the thing that we feel is aligned well to our belief system, that we want to embrace in our business, and then to make that come alive in our thinking across the business is I've used the word pre-program. Actually, what you're doing is you are installing a predefined value system in a way of looking at things, so that when you get to that 0.2 second moment, you make a call where that thing is fresh in your mind. And that's again what I meant by the 0.2 seconds is actually more than enough time for the brain to catch itself out. And instead of jumping into something that would be the Balvin roles are still connected to this in some way. I don't know if you guys have heard about the drama triangle. But if we don't check in on our roles, we often jump into something like a victim mentality, or we want to be the hero, or we feel like we are the villain as well. And then we embrace those type of roles. But if you figured out how you want to be clear about the different roles how you show up and what is expected of you, then you can use that 0.2 second moment to catch yourself out and behave in a different way. So I think it's great, but it's not about specifically just one way of doing it. I think again, it's great if you could get the people involved to identify what matters to them, and then to help formulate an approach that helps all of them. A company that's similar to our equivalent of Spark in South Africa was MTN in mobile. That's a different company that I'm referring to now in the cellular space. But they actually reached out in formulating something similar to this to the entire business, and they let everybody share one significant story that they've had about their company in a half a page to a page. They actually needed to type out the whole thing. And then people analyzed all of those responses, and through the storytelling, they started picking up patterns of what people wanted, and they created something very specific for them. And then they started actually introducing it back into the business. People embraced it, and that 0.2 second moment that I keep on referring to definitely made a big difference in how they showed up. So I think I've maybe said more than just answering your question. So maybe we should pull an Elmo on that one.
Good one. Okay. So another one, Lonnie's asked a very practical question. So practically facilitating this with your teams or whatever, do you do it as a group activity or individual breakouts, or a mixture of both? If you wanted to bring this into your company.
Are you still on the call, Lonnie?
Yep, I am. Sorry, I'm traveling, so it's a little
that's
noisy.
all right. It would have been super awkward had you not been on the call anymore. But
No,
thankful.
it's still here.
Yeah, so my thinking, were you referring to the ground rules that I was talking about in particular, or what were you thinking about?
I was thinking about the whole element of, the ladder of inference. When you've used it in the past, have you, you know, how have you facilitated this? Has it been in different ways? Sorry about the noise. Has it been in different ways and, you know, different, you know, depends on the context, or is there a go-to facilitation method that you think works well with using it?
Yeah, so when we built in this capability into businesses, there was a clear. So you don't want to introduce too many theories. I think that's the first thing, and you don't want to use too many big words either. You don't blow up people out, because you could, if you pull the stuff out of Chris Argyris's ladder of inference, there's a lot of things that would make you sound very fancy that you can throw out there for everybody, and it actually just confuses everybody, overwhelms them, and makes them feel less confident to actually embrace it. And I think that's the first thing. Keep it simple. Even keep the theory simple, and let people just have a bit of a discussion about it, and then make a decision together around those ground rules, the 6 that I provided there. Or if they want to go and adapt it a bit to their own context, let them adapt it. I then have seen a lot of value in giving them a case study or a simulation, or even if it's something in their work, just something that is safe enough to try out these ground rules on that. And then you still make for example, the ladder of inference very visible for them to reference and have a look at. And then you, as an observer or a facilitator, then let them have a go at that problem that they're trying to solve. And then you also upfront ask for permission that you can stop the process and actually reflect with them on what you've observed. And then to have a bit of a conversation. So you step out of the process, so you don't let that 0.2 moment, that autopilot, just keep on going all the way through. Slow it down, talk about it, reflect together about the meaning behind it. You guide them back into the ladder, you make it safe for them, and then once everybody feels okay, you go back into the simulation or that safe to fail exercise. I would actually still feel like one of the most valuable ways in which we've done it is to get permission. And this one is a bit radical, so I wouldn't expect you guys to go and do that from tomorrow. But actually let the team give each other permission that they're going to record one of these exercises, these activities of theirs, and let them, as in video, record the whole half an hour or the hour that they do things together. And then they do a playback of that recording together as a team. And with you facilitating, I think, is a very key part of it as well. But then you can take them through it, and actually everybody starts becoming the curious investigator of that moment, and say, oh, how fascinating. Look how I showed up there. I thought I'm living these 6 ground rules, but clearly not, because look how I showed up there. And then they start opening it up to each other to say, how can I do this differently? And maybe that's actually the phrase. Even if you forget everything that I said over the last three minutes, Lani, stick with the phrase, does anybody see this differently? Like that is one of the best phrases. Instead of encouraging people to think about disagreements, or like, where are we at odds with each other, just does anybody see this differently? I think is a very powerful question to help people get into that ladder of inference without making it an overwhelming theory or a model to go and reflect on. I hope that helps.
That's really helpful. Yeah, really helpful. Thank you so much.
Tanya, you're on mute.
Of course I am. That means I owe you a coffee, doesn't it? Clayton's rules. Okay, so Han, are you still on the call? You had a question. Would you like to ask that one to Brendan? We're running out of time, so I'm gonna choose the questions where people are still on the call. Han, are you still on the call? Okay, Clayton, you're next. So do you want to share yours? Or yours was, let's see.
Oh, he said he had to go. No, Clayton did say that he had to go early.
Yeah, his was actually more of a comment than a question anyway. Let me just, Alex's was a comment.
Hans says he doesn't have a mic.
Oh, he doesn't. Okay, I will ask Han's question for him then, since he doesn't have a mic, but he's still here. Great. Okay, so Han says, if you've got an environment where there's somebody controlling the group conversation, so that I'm assuming, Han, you mean like a manager that's controlling the group conversations, how would you suggest ways to create an environment for fair discussions to help induct someone who has newly onboarded into the conversations? So that's kind of why I wanted Han to clarify. So is it like a new team member, perhaps?
Yeah. I feel like what I might say is just following almost the same recipe again and just reminding people of the ground rules together. But it's maybe tied again to the idea of, if one new person joins, you should probably regard the team as being back in a forming stage and not just assume that we're in a mature, high performing way of working again as a team. So a good opportunity, like Jeremy said earlier, as well. Jump back into the working agreements. If you already had the ground rules that you've agreed to,
With the
look at them.
ServiceNow option.
Kira,
Oh, Kira, you're not on mute.
you're right. I've muted Kira
Okay.
now. So yeah, I'm not going to. I don't think we're going to labor that one too much, given the fact that there's only a couple of minutes left. But hopefully, that does still answer through the conversation we've just had. If not, Han, reach out. We can talk further.
And look, it just seems like most of them are now comments, people saying, you know, thank you, Brendan, and that they've enjoyed it. So I think that that's probably all of the questions we've got for now. So
sorry, can I just touch base? Brendan,
sorry,
if I can connect
Andy,
on LinkedIn time.
Sorry, Andy, you just broke
That's
up.
fine.
Andy.
We run out of time, so.
Oh yeah,
What?
no, all good. Sorry, you broke
Yeah.
up quite a bit there, so we couldn't really hear what you were saying. You want to just take another stab at a quick 2-second summary of that?
Yeah, sure. We've run out of time, but maybe I can touch base with you on LinkedIn. I think my question was overlooked. So yeah, hopefully we can still have a conversation.
Would
Thank
love
you,
it
Brendan.
if you've got my details. And do we find a way? So two things just on my mind. The one is I've just put a fun little link in the chat. You'll see it says F1 start glitch. It actually, they've looked at the start reaction times of F1 drivers. And that typically was also between about a 0.2 and a 0.3 seconds. See if you can beat the time. So I just put that into the chat for you as well. So if you follow the link, you can see that simulates a starting check flag just before you start an F1 race that you need to click. So see how you do. But Tanya, Andy, do we share the slides with people? How do they get it?
yes, thank you for that. So yes, what we're going to do, guys, please do connect with Brendan, Andy as well on LinkedIn and continue the conversation and get his help with the question that we missed. Sorry about that. But everyone else, go to our Business Agility New Zealand LinkedIn page. If you haven't already followed us, start following us. We're going to put links to the video of today's meeting, as well as links to where you can access the slides. And that will all be on our LinkedIn page. So thank you all very much. Thank you so much, Brendan. It's been really educational, and I feel like I'm going to have to watch the video again and read the slide deck again in a lot more detail, because there was just a lot there. So thank you so much for your time. It's been amazing. And all of you guys, thank you so much for joining us.